Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Chiefs briefing for the March 5th, 2024 Democratic and Republican presidential primary elections. We're so happy to have you with us, and we want to jump right into it. So first off, welcome to our Chiefs briefing. Our electoral board this year is the same as it was last year. Our chairman is the Honorable Catherine Hanley. Our vice chairman of the electoral board is Jeffrey Shapiro, and the secretary of the electoral board is retired ambassador Christopher Hensel. We also have our general registrar and director of elections, Eric Spicer, and our deputy director of elections, deputy general registrar, Cheryl Jones. Cheryl, would you like to say a few words to all of our chiefs and assistant chiefs who are joining us this morning? Cheryl, are you there with us?
I am. I'm sorry.
There we go.
My picture is very small, and I couldn't find the unmute button. Welcome, everybody, and thank you so much for being chiefs. Special shout out to the new chiefs who are brave enough and assistant chiefs to step up and do the job. We really appreciate it. Without you, we couldn't do it. And keep in mind that many people in the office have been chiefs or assistant chiefs, so we know what you're going through. We're not just a bureaucrat sitting in an office. We're here to help you out on election day. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to pick up the phone and call us. We've got people sitting by the phones, and you really make our day when you call and we can solve your problem. We want to help you. We want to support you. We want to make your day as easy as possible and reduce mistakes. And thanks again for serving. We look forward to a really smooth election day.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Cheryl. I'm fortunately joined by many excellent staff for our briefing today. First off, my name is Ravi Udeshi. I serve as our election manager in the Office of Elections. I oversee all of our in-person voting. But we have some great new faces to join us for this briefing in our office. So let's go ahead and introduce them. Gretchen?
Hi, everyone. My name is Gretchen Coleman, and I am the election officer manager here. So I oversee all the precinct assignments, and I've been corresponding with many of you to get ready. So welcome, and thank you so much for being here.
And we have a new training and operations manager, Sean Rogers. Sean?
Thanks, Ravi. My name is Sean Rogers. I'm our new, like you said, training and operations manager. Just started a couple of weeks ago. So coming in while we're getting ready for an election has its own challenges, but I think it's been going pretty well. I'm take care of all of our training needs and several other additional things beyond that. But otherwise, I'm looking forward to a great election and a great rest of our elections this year.
Hi, my name is Jean Tenson, and I work for Sean. I've been a longtime chief, assistant chief, and rover, and I'm very excited to be helping everybody with this election.
And hi, I'm Kelly Roberts. I work for Gretchen on the election officer staff. I've also been an election officer and a chief, and now assist with staffing the precincts. So welcome, everyone.
Thank you, Kelly. We have a very large team of staff that do everything required to get everything ready for all of you as chiefs and assistant chiefs. And those of us here in the room today presenting, we're building on all the efforts and work that they've done. Before we go into the content of this briefing, we have a quick poll for you. Gretchen, do you want to introduce this to everyone?
Yes, thank you. So now that we've introduced ourselves, we want to get a sense of who is in the room with us and get to know you all just a little bit. So I'm going to launch a quick interactive poll. So this should be showing up on your screen. Let's see right now. So if you could just answer the quick questions, we can see what the highest position you've held in Fairfax County elections is before this election and get a sense of who's in the room with us. So give it just a couple more seconds for you all to respond. We've got most of you participating already. You guys are quick to it, which is awesome. All right, now it looks like just about everyone's answered, so I'll end the poll and share the results. So it looks like many of you have been a chief before, which is awesome to hear. So I'm glad to have all that experience with us on election day. And it looks like we have a lot of new officers as we're new to the chief and assistant chief position as well. So this is your first time serving as a chief or assistant chief. Welcome. We're hoping that this will make you feel more comfortable and competent on election day, and we're thrilled that you're here. So thank you all. And now I will pass it back over to Robbie.
Thank you, Gretchen. So we're going to spend the first hour or so of our briefing today going over a number of procedural and legal updates for this election. It is a dual party primary election, so we're going to go through what changes in terms of the procedures for that. And then we'll kind of go chronologically through before election day on through election day. And Gretchen, Sean, Gene, and I will take different parts of that. And at the end of this, we'll take your live questions. So go ahead and wait to the end of each kind of section as we do the overview or the dual party primary procedures. We may go ahead and preemptively answer the questions that you have. But if you do have questions, you can submit them using the question and answer function in Zoom. So look for that button at the bottom of your screen. You can open that up, submit questions to us, and then we will answer them live at the end of this Q&A. All right, let's go into an overview of some of the things you need to know for this election. First off, always remember that you will have a Chief's notebook with you on election day. We've also sent you a PDF version of this already by email, and it's available in the election officer portal. The Chief's notebook is a comprehensive manual that covers all the information you need to know. We don't expect you to memorize everything in there, but we do want you to skim through it and be aware of where the relevant information is so you know where to look when you need that information. So again, you want to review this before election day. You already have a PDF available, and you'll have an opportunity to pick up a physical copy later. Be aware that the first 4 pages of the Chief's notebook are a table of contents with page numbers, and it's clickable, so you can jump to any section of the notebook right from that table of contents. And then the next 4 pages cover the important changes for a dual party primary election. That's all on 1 page, so you can see here's what you need to know in a dual party primary election. And then we have a couple pages covering what's new for this election, some of the procedural changes that we've made to hopefully make your life a little bit easier. So just remember, review that Chief's notebook before election day, and you definitely want to go through the first section, that overview section, and the first few pages of it goes through what's new for this election, which we'll also cover in a little bit more detail here during this briefing. So in terms of resources for each precinct, you're going to have 5 to 10 total election officers. That includes the chief, assistant chief, and SDR specialist in every precinct. You will have between 3 to 5 poll pads. You'll have 2 express votes, 2 DS200 ballot scanners, 1 admin tablet, which is a separate device for some other functions than the poll books. And of course, we'll have enough ballots for this election. So in a presidential primary election, you never know how many voters may show up. And so we've ordered more than enough ballots to make sure that you will not run out on election day. We've ordered enough Democratic ballots for 40 to 45% of active registered voters, depending on the precinct, and an equal number of Republican ballots also for 40 to 45% of active registered voters. Again, in a presidential primary election, things just can change. 4 years ago, in the last presidential primary election, we didn't have no excuse absentee voting. And so we're not sure how many people would choose to vote on election day versus before election day this time. And also, anyone may vote in any party's primary. So there's possible that we may have a higher number of voters in one party's primary than the other. So we want to be sure that we have enough ballots for all these situations for you. So in this election, you're going to receive 2 different types of ballots. Every precinct will receive packs of ballots with the Democratic primary contest and packs of ballots with the Republican primary contest. So you're going to want to look in that top right corner to see whether it says a D or an R to indicate what type of ballot it is. It's also spelled out on the top left corner of the ballot itself. And you can see on the contest, there's only 1 contest on each ballot. It's for the presidential nominee for each party. Now, there are 3 Democratic candidates on the Democratic ballot and 6 candidates on the Republican ballot. And you may have heard some things in the news about candidates withdrawing or suspending their campaign. So just so you're aware of this, if any candidate formally withdraws and submits a written notification to the Virginia Department of Elections, then we will go ahead and post signs at each polling place to notify voters that that candidate has withdrawn. Ballots are not reprinted. Based on state guidelines, once we pass a certain date, the ballots are what they are. And so you won't have a new ballot that omits certain candidates. Now, all that said, if a candidate chooses to suspend their campaign, but does not actually submit an official withdrawal, then no action is taken. And that's often what we see nowadays with a lot of candidates. So as of today, no candidates have officially withdrawn. Some candidates have chosen to suspend their campaign, which is an informal action and doesn't change anything on our part in terms of the ballots or posting signs. And you might get questions from voters or from your election officers. Excuse me. So just to confirm, all votes for candidates on the ballots are tabulated and reported on election night. Just like in any election, we welcome authorized representatives in the polling place. They're a welcome and accepted part of our election process. So be aware that in a general election, like the one we had this past November, authorized representatives must represent a party or an independent candidate on the ballot. But in a primary election like this one, authorized representatives must represent a candidate that is on the ballot. So if you have someone that shows up at your polling place and says they're an authorized representative, great. Ask them for the authorization letter that should be signed by a candidate that's on the ballot. And if they have any questions or they say they're there to represent the party, you're always welcome to point them to the relevant Virginia Code section, which is there on the screen. It's in your chief's notebook, and we'll put it in the last minute memo. And if you have any further questions or issues, feel free to give us a call in the office. We're very happy to help you work that out with anyone. But we've been in open communication with both the local party committees. They're aware of these regulations around this process. We haven't had any issues in early voting, so I'm hopeful for a very smooth process on election day. All right, well, let's talk about the elephant in the room. It's a dual party primary, and that means there's some changes. Our last dual party primary was 4 years ago in the June 2020 election. So we know that most of you may not have had to do this before. So we want to go through just a quick overview of what are the relevant things that are impacted by it being a dual party primary. And then some of our other panelists will go into more detail later in their sections. But let's go through an overview of this information first. Now, first off, every polling place, every precinct is going to get 3 copies of a large yellow sign that looks just like this, that reminds everyone that Virginia law allows voters to vote in only one party's primary. So if a voter comes in, they can't vote in both parties' primaries, even though in effect, we're conducting 2 elections on the same day. So they can only vote in one party's primary. Also, in Virginia, voters do not register by party, which means that when a voter checks in, they are going to have to choose which party's primary they want to vote in. So that's going to be part of that check-in process that the voter will, the check-in officers will ask the voter, which party's primary would you like to vote in? And the voter will have to provide that information back to you to say, sure, I want to vote in the Democratic primary, or I'd like to vote in the Republican primary. Once they provide that information to your check-in officers, on the poll pad, there is an additional screen that will look like this. So you search for the voter, tap on their name, and then you come to a screen like this, where you will select which party's primary that voter would like to vote in. It's very simple. You just tap either Democratic or Republican. That's it. When it comes time to issuing ballots, what you're going to do is the check-in officer is going to issue a voter permit card in one of 2 colors. So for example, the voter permit card might be blue or red in most precincts, and you would issue that voter permit card to the voter. So at the time that you make the selection on the poll pad, you would get that voter permit card ready to give to them. And then at the ballot table, the ballot officer will exchange the voter permit card for either a Democratic ballot or a Republican ballot for that voter. So again, the voter checks in at the check-in table, indicates which primary they want to vote in. The check-in officer will issue them a voter permit card, and the voter can take that voter permit card to the ballot officer, who will exchange it for an actual ballot. So some other things to be aware of. Voters are permitted to scan their ballot in any DS200. We don't configure our DS200 scanners to be different, one for Democratic ballots and one for Republican ballots. So do not require voters to scan their ballots in one DS200 or the other, depending on the party selection. So just be aware of that. When it comes time during closing, you're going to box ballots by your DS200, not by party. So when you remove the ballots from a DS200, put all ballots for a given DS200 in 1 or 2 boxes, but you don't go through and sift through them and separate them by which party that ballot was. And I want to make sure you're all aware that there's many forms that have to be updated to account for it being a dual party primary. These forms include the ballot receipt, the results worksheet, the results notice, the statement of results, and others. And on each of these forms, instead of just writing total voters checked in or total ballots cast, you're going to write things like how many ballots were cast in the Democratic primary and how many ballots were cast in the Republican primary. So let's look at a few of those forms. First, here's the ballot receipt form. So as a reminder, this is the form that you sign to acknowledge how many ballots you received and where you record how many ballots are in each pack as you open them. So we've updated this form to have entries for both Democratic ballots and Republican ballots. So you can see that this precinct received 1,000 Democratic ballots and 1,000 Republican ballots. And once you confirm that's what you see in the boxes, you go ahead and sign. And then during the day in that bottom section there, as you open each pack of ballots, it should have 200 ballots, but if it doesn't, if it has 199 or is a 201, then you would certainly note that there. Now we expect that all the ballots should have the right number of ballots in each pack. So in most cases, you're probably just going to be writing 200, 200, 200 for each column. One of the forms that comes up during the closing procedures is the statement of results. So the statement of results, the way that we're doing all the math on this form is the exact same as in the elections that we had last year. What is different is now you have two columns in a lot of these sections, one for Democratic and one for Republican. So for example, in section 1 for voters checked in, on the poll pad, there's a way to see those numbers. How many voters were checked in for the Democratic primary? How many voters were checked in for the Republican primary? The same thing in part 3 for ballots cast. There's a way to get those numbers for the Democratic ballots and for the Republican ballots. Now be aware that specifically for the DS200s, it is a little bit different where you're looking to get those numbers. So let's show that to you on the next slide. This is a sample ballot status accounting report. It's one of the reports that prints from each DS200 at the end of the day. Usually we look for the entries that say standard ballot sheets and total express vote cards. But again, because we have to report numbers by party, you're going to be looking in slightly different places. This exact image is in your Chief's notebook. So don't worry, this is in there. You can look at this again on election day. But I just want to bring your attention to it now that when it comes time in part 3 of the SOR to record how many ballots were scanned each DS200 by party, you can look at that section, that first red box that says ballot counts per party, and it has those numbers, Republican Party, Democratic Party. Simple and straightforward. Next, in part 6 of the SOR, you'll have to record how many pre-printed paper ballots were scanned in the DS200. So that means the regular ballots, not the express vote ballots. And it's a little bit weird, so that's why we want to make sure you're aware of this. You're going to look for these two rows that say ballots for code. And then you see there's some codes there, 00000101 or 00000201. Well, it's on the SOR. It'll tell you what those codes mean, whether that code is for Republican ballots or Democratic ballots. And so you would just copy those numbers over accordingly. So for example, the number that's 01-01, that might be Democratic ballots. So you would write 555 in the Democratic column. And the same for the other one, for the other party. And then finally, in part 7 of the SOR, you're writing the number of express vote cards that were scanned to the DS200. And that one's a little bit easier. You're looking for the section there at the bottom of the ballot status accounting report that says cards for style. And it would just have a D or an R. It won't have the whole word spelled out. So where it says D, okay, that's Democratic express vote cards. And in this example, we can see there were 2 of those. And then for R, there were 5 express vote cards cast in the Republican primary. So you can copy that number over. Again, these instructions and this image are in your Chief's notebook in the closing section. But if you have questions, you are more than welcome to call us on election day, during closing, whenever you'd like, and we can help walk you through this because we want to make sure you do it correctly. Another form that's updated is the results notice. So the results notice is where you're writing the actual vote totals for each candidate, and you'll have that for the Republican primary, and it's a little bit cut off here, but for the Democratic primary. But at the top of this form, there's some totals, and those numbers are separated for the most part by Democratic and Republican again, and you simply copy them from either the SOR or from your provisional envelopes, your 1A envelopes. There is one number on there, total curbside voters. That number is not separated by party. And finally, one other piece to be aware of that's different in a dual party primary is how we handle provisional ballots. There's a few significant changes to be aware of. So first, as each voter completes a provisional ballot envelope, an election officer has to write D or R in the top right corner to identify which party's ballot is contained within that envelope. And later in these slides during the provisional section, we'll show you an image of what that looks like. When you or your SDR specialist enters provisional ballots in the electronic provisional ballot log, you're going to see a new question that just asks you to identify, is this a Democratic ballot or Republican ballot for this provisional? Very easy, just one question. And finally, you will now have 4 large 1A envelopes to return all your provisional ballots. So the way these get divided is you'll have returned your SDR ballots that contain Democratic ballots in one of the 1A envelopes, your SDR ballots, same-day registration ballots that contain Republican ballots in another envelope, your non-SDR provisionals that contain Democratic ballots in a third envelope, and your non-SDR provisionals that contain Republican ballots in a fourth envelope. If any of this is confusing, feel free to ask us questions. All right, now let's go into what's new for this election that's not related to it being a dual party primary. We've sprinkled some of these updates throughout the briefing today, but I want to cover just a couple major ones that I want you to be aware of. First, as a reminder, we made some changes in last year's elections. And so just a few of these to bring to your attention. First, the process for receiving your poll pads and your black kit has changed last year. That is all now picked up by the chief on the day before the election. And if you haven't already, go into the election officer portal and sign up for a time to do that. You can see those yellow signs in the top right. We've now replaced all of our yard signs, our real estate signs, with a unified design that's yellow and black like this. So those are the types of signs you'll see. As a reminder, Lee Highway was renamed to Route 29 and Lee Jackson Memorial Highway was renamed to Route 50. And the voter might provide the old name when they're checking in, but that's okay. You see that red envelope in the middle of your screen? That is our emergency envelope, where we put some of the emergency materials that you're not typically going to need during most elections, things like your backup paper provisional ballot log, or your emergency authorization to reproduce ballots, stuff you almost never need, but it's in that red emergency envelope. To the right of that, we have the yellow envelopes with green and red labels, your opening and closing envelopes. So all of your opening forms will be together in one envelope. All your closing forms will be in one envelope. Towards the bottom, you can see just images of some different forms that we've updated to make them a little bit simpler. So all of this is covered in the Chief's notebook, if you're not sure of what changed last year. We also have 2 pages in the Chief's notebook about what's new this election. And so those are some of the things that we're going to cover during this briefing. But again, it's in your notebook. All right, last year, you may recall that we had our equipment carts. Well, there's a bit of a change, not in what you're receiving, but what it's called. So we used to have equipment carts. Now we call them equipment cages. So just don't be alarmed if, as you're speaking with your rover, as you're going through the Chief's notebook, you see the term equipment cage and you don't know what that's referring to. It's the same carts that you received last year. We're just calling them cages to be more accurate and descriptive of what they are. Here's one I'm really excited about. It's our machine certification form. So you can see the old version there on the left, the one that we were using last year, and the one on the right is now the new version that we're using. We've really updated this form to make it simpler and easier to use. In the old version, all the numbers that you would review before polls open were in that top half, and all the numbers that you would fill in were in the bottom half. But you had to be really careful to make sure you filled everything in, you had to make sure things lined up, and sometimes precincts will forget 1 or 2 numbers. Well, in the new form, the one that's on the right, we've made it a lot simpler. All of your opening numbers are in one column, and all the closing numbers are recorded in another column, the rightmost column. So we hope that makes it easier to fill in the numbers, to match things up between opening and closing, and to make sure that you don't have any numbers that are missing. I also want to bring your attention to the section at the bottom. So as a reminder, this form requires signatures from 2 officers. And in this election and going forward, that's going to be the chief and the assistant chief. So don't forget to sign this form during your closing procedures so that you don't have to come to the office. And finally, I want to bring your attention to a new kind of tamper tape that we're using. So we use red tamper tape to seal ballots at the end of the day. And the tape that we're using now is upgraded for this election. It's this big, bold red tape, and it is much more adhesive than the old tape that we used to use. Do not use this tape to hang signs or posters. It will severely damage the walls of your polling place. We do not want any calls from polling place building staff letting us know that you've used this tape on the walls. So we've put it in a special plastic bag that says do not open during closing. But you can see that image on the bottom right. What happens is when you apply this tape to a box or to a wall or to any surface, and then you attempt to remove it, it leaves a very, very visible residue there that indicates that it has been void and opened. So the reason we use this tape on our boxes of ballots is we want to make it very clear that we have a strong security process for our boxes of ballots. Those are the number 3 boxes, number 6 boxes at the end of the day. And that if anyone were to try to tamper with them or to open them, it would become very, very obvious. So again, we have new upgraded red tamper tape. The way that you use it is the same as before. It's just much stronger, much more adhesive. So you want to make sure no one accidentally uses it for any purpose other than sealing boxes of ballots. And finally, we're introducing an election officer code of conduct. I want to turn it over to Gretchen to talk to you more about this.
Thank you. Like Robbie said, we have a new election officer code of conduct that will be going into place for this upcoming election. We're still finalizing some details of it right now, but we will send it out in the full version to an email to you all before Election Day, as well as provide physical copies in your precinct for reference. There should be no brand new information on here. It's basically just building on existing rules and procedures and policies that we already have in place for election officers, but putting it in one document so it's a lot easier to reference so we can provide clear expectations to you all. So you'll get more information about this later. I just wanted to put it on your radar that it's coming soon. Thanks. And then with that, we'll transition to kind of, now that we've gone through the overall overview and updates for this election, we'll get into some of the specifics that you should be doing first before Election Day. So you should have hopefully been getting regular emails from us. Some of them have gone through because you guys are all here, so that's great. But please be constantly checking your emails and voicemails to make sure that you're up to date with all recent communication from the Office of Elections. An easy way to do that is to add the Office of Elections as a contact in your email inbox and in your phone. So if you add this email, electionofficers@fairfaxcounty.gov, and this phone number into your contacts, that way nothing will get lost to spam filters or anything else like that. But please do check your information regularly. We are sending out almost every day some kind of new update that's really important to know for the election. So it's important that you keep up to date on all of this communication. Another way to look for big updates is in the election officer portal. So this was new for the last election, but it is your one-stop shop for all of your election officer resources. So if you have a question, the portal is usually a good place to start for that. And what's something new for this election that I'm excited to share, this is just applicable to chiefs. So assistant chiefs and reserve chiefs and assistant chiefs have a similar portal to what they've had in the past. But the chief page in the portal is revamped for this election to make it really clear what your steps are to take for Election Day. So huge thank you to our training and operations team for putting this together. But you can see that there are several different steps you have to take starting this week, going through the Election Day to be ready to get your precinct set up and ready to go. And this makes it really clear what those steps are, how to take those steps, and what the due dates are for those. So this on the screen is a sample of what it would look like in one of the precincts. So you can see the step. You can click the button to the right of the step to navigate you to a different page in the portal with more instructions. And the really cool feature about this is that you can update the progress as you go. So if you click that Update Status of Tasks button in the top of the portal, the top of that page, you can indicate that you've completed it, and then you'll get that really satisfying green check mark next to the step to let you know that you're finished. Hopefully, if you're like me and really like having a good list to keep things straight, this will make it really easy to clarify what your responsibilities are before Election Day. So definitely, as you're preparing, make sure to check that list. But I want to give a couple highlights of the things that you should be doing by Monday to be sure you're on track for Election Day. So one of them is to contact your precinct roster. So in the election officer portal, we have a list of all the other election officers, including the assistant chief, the SDR specialists, and all other election officers who are assigned to your precinct along with their contact information. So please give them a call, introduce yourself, send out that first wave of communication to them before this upcoming Monday. So that way you can check in with them, answer any questions they have, and make that first contact. Similarly, we ask that you contact your polling place by this upcoming Monday as well. This is a good way to introduce yourself if you haven't worked at that polling place before, verify if all the contact information is correct, everything like that. And kind of make that first contact as well. Some critical things to do when you contact your polling place is to verify that the listed setup time is correct. So they've all given us a window that has the times that you're able to come in on that Monday before the election and set up your precinct, and verify that that is still the case. That time works for them to set up your polling place. The other thing to double check is that the Election Day contacts are correct. And so this is especially important for that 5 a.m. Start time on election morning. So if for whatever reason the building is closed, you're not able to get in, the person that you call in needs to be able to answer and get you right away. So if you verify that ahead of time, you'll save a lot of headache on election morning. The other big pre-election event that I wanted to flag for you all is the Chief Open House, which is coming up this upcoming Tuesday, February 27th, and it's open to all chiefs, assistant chiefs, and reserve assistant chiefs to get all of your questions answered before Election Day. This is a good opportunity if you have any last-minute questions or want to get some hands-on practice with the forms or the equipment, you can drop in and get your questions answered. Please sign up for an entry time in the portal so we know when to expect you. And the other big thing I wanted to flag about the Chief Open House is this is your opportunity to pick up the physical copy of your Chief's notebook before Election Day. So I know that many of you really like having that paper copy in front of you so you can start taking notes and highlighting things well before Election Day. And so this is your opportunity. If you come to the open house, you can get that hands-on practice and also get the notebook ready to go. If you're not able to come to the open house, that's totally okay. It's completely optional. And in that case, you will pick up your copy of the Chief's notebook during the Monday, March 4th supplies pickup. So now transitioning over into the day before Election Day. So there's a couple steps you need to do on Monday, March 4th specifically. And so it's a two-part process. So first, you will go to a depot location, so either at the Fairfax County Government Center or a couple of different locations across the county at the time that you've already indicated to pick up your supplies. So that'll be sometime between 1 p.m. and 6 p.m. To pick up the black kit and the poll pads. The cage will already be at your polling place, but this is the other supplies you will need for Election Day. And so once you do that, you will go straight over to your polling place for the site setup. So make sure that when you when you coordinate your supply pickup time, that it matches that with whatever travel time is needed to get to your setup time for your polling place. And so this part needs a little bit of coordination with your polling place ahead of time. So that's why it's so important to do that polling place contact well ahead of Election Day and to figure out the best setup time for your polling place. So if your polling place is at a Fairfax County public school, this is already taken care of for you. We have already agreed with all of the FCPS schools that the setup window will be between 4:30 p.m. and 7:30 p.m., which means that you must start and finish within that window. Still, once you should let them know what time within that 3-hour window you're coming. I want to emphasize again, coordinate that setup time with the polling place beforehand. Don't just show up because there might not be anyone to let you in. And we have a really good checklist of the things to do for that Monday setup in the Chief's notebook. So I won't go into all of the details, but just make sure you follow all of those steps carefully. Make sure you can double check that you have all of your supplies ready to go. So that way, if anything is missing, we can get them to you before Election Day. And you won't do any of the big setup for the equipment. So you'll leave the DS200s in the cage and the poll pads as well. So you won't worry about those then. And you'll lock those in the cage overnight. But just a couple other things to think about for the Monday setup is not necessarily all of that equipment setup, like I mentioned, but this is a good chance to finalize your voting room layout and kind of the overall flow of things for Election Day. So that involves not just the voting room setup, but the entrance from the parking lot into the building, kind of that flow of the flow of walking in to get to the voting room. So accessibility is a really important thing to keep in mind for that. Maintaining that clear path of travel anywhere that the voter might be going on Election Day. So that involves both adequate space to maneuver and signage, so it's really clear where to go if someone requires accommodations. We have a lot more information about this in the Chief's notebook as well, so make sure you follow that accessibility list. The other thing to keep in mind when you're thinking about that path of travel is for about half of you for this after-school program going on at Fairfax County Public Schools. So there is an after-school childcare program that will be going on Election Day on March 5th. And we want to make sure that voters and everyone related to the election steers clear of that space in each school. And so you might be wondering, does this apply to me? And we have an answer for that. If you go into the election officer portal, we will tell you one way or another whether the STAC program will be going on in your polling place on Election Day. And if it is going on Election Day, that is a good thing to coordinate with your polling place contact. So they will confirm what rooms in the building that STAC program will be going on. And then all you have to do is steer voters away from any of those spaces. So block off hallways if need be, plan out that path of travel ahead of time so there's no interaction between the children and the voters. If you have any further questions about that, reach out to your polling place contact, to your rover, or give our office a call. Just a few final reminders for that Monday, March 4th polling place setup is please don't put any tape on the gym floors. That would destroy the floors and we can't have that happen. So if you need any alternatives, contact your polling place staff and they'll help you figure out something else out. And finally, this is a little bit of a shameless plug from the election officer team, but I'm excited that we have these new updated election officer recruitment posters. And so voters are really the best place to start because they already live locally in your area. So please post this sign. Generally, it works best to place it kind of on the exit. So as voters have already voted, they're excited and they realize that they could work with you at the next election. So have them scan that they can scan that QR code and apply to become an election officer going forward. So that was a lot of information about the before election day proceedings. So I wanted to pause and do another interactive poll to make sure that we've clarified all the important information for the pre-election materials. I'm going to launch another poll. There we go. So this should all be showing up on your screens. So the question is, when is the deadline for chiefs to first contact their precinct roster and polling place? So your options are this Friday, the 23rd, Monday, the 26th, next Friday, March 1st, and next Tuesday, March 5th. I'll give you just a couple moments to answer that. And like I said, if in the future you're wondering what the deadline is, always go to the election officer portal and that will have the information about the rest of the deadlines you need to do before election day.
Gretchen, as the answers come in, I can say I'm very happy that our officers are paying attention to our briefing and to our instructions.
I am too, and I'm also happy that so far no one has picked Tuesday, March 5th, because election day would be much too late to first contact your officers. So it looks like most people have already answered, so I'll go ahead and end the poll. And yes, the vast majority of you were correct that the deadline to contact your precinct roster and polling place is Monday, February 26th. And as a reminder, that is also the deadline to watch the recording of this briefing and select your polling place time as well. So you can find all that information in the election officer portal. And make sure if you're a chief, you can go check those steps off as well once you've completed them. And with that, we will move on to our next section. So we've covered all of the things you need to do before election day. Now we'll get into what you do on election day. So to start, opening the polls. And so all of you are well aware at this point, it is a very early morning, but well worth it. So you arrive at 5 a.m. So you and all officers must arrive 5 a.m. sharp. The first thing you should do is double check everyone is on that final roster we've provided in the election officer portal, that everyone in your precinct should be there, and then swear them in. And so every election, there are some very last minute cancellations. Things come up at the very end, so officers may not arrive. So give them about half an hour to see if anyone is just coming in late, anything like that. Note when they come in late, but anything before 5:30, don't give us a call until 5:30, just to give them a chance to get in. And so once you give us a call, we have some reserve officers ready to go. So these are officers who are not yet assigned to a precinct, so they're ready and on standby to replace some of those last minute cancellations. So give us a call and then we'll be able to send over a reserve officer your way. And so just to make things a little bit faster, because we have a lot of phone calls coming in during that first hour between 5 and 6, when you're calling the office, always provide the precinct number and the name. So for example, 100 Patriot, and that would be in all of your materials. You should be able to find that pretty easily. The reason we ask that rather than the name of the polling place, for example, Lincoln High School, is that we have many co-located precincts, which means that there's 2 precincts at one building. And so if you just say the building name, we might not know which precinct you're referring to. Other things to do when you're doing that, opening the polls during that 1 hour setup on election morning, is unload your equipment cage. And so the vast majority of precincts will have that same big gray cage that you used in the last election. And there's about 10% of precincts that will have a slight variation on that cage. So it's still a big cage. It's just black instead of gray, and it's a little bit taller and a little bit narrower. There's not much that's different about it except for some of the unpacking of materials. Most notably, the DS200 scanners will be sideways rather than facing front. So if you are in one of those 10% of precincts with the black cage, then just make sure we'll have separate instructions for you to follow about how to pack and unpack your cage. But for everyone else, really the biggest thing to remember is how to unload that giant DS200 scanner. And it looks a little cumbersome, but once you get the hang of it, it's not too bad to load and unload. So for example, we have this demonstration video, which we have in the election officer portal as well, to show you how to unload the cage from the cart. So go ahead and play that. you can see, always have 3 people at any time to load and unload this machine because it's so large. You can see that they're tilting it out first, getting the wheels on the ground, and then slowly rolling it in place. And so if you want to watch that again, feel free to review it anytime, but that's the safe way to load and unload the DS200. And other things to keep in mind when you're setting up that equipment is you have 2 DS200 scanners. Please set up both of them during opening. You really only need to use one of the DS200 scanners during the day as voters are scanning in their ballots. But you want to make sure that you set up both of them. So if something goes wrong with the one machine for whatever reason, the other one is ready to go and you don't waste any time trying to set it up while the polls are open. And you'll have 2 express vote machines. You will only need to set up one of those before Election Day. And another thing to keep in mind is sometimes, depending on the setup, the layout of the room, you may need more extension cords to be able to plug in these machines. And if that's the case, please check that out before Election Day and let your rover know so we can make sure that you have those cords well ahead of time. The other thing I wanted to flag for the opening the polls is if you're experiencing any major issues that would prevent you from opening on time, please give us a call right away and we'll do what we can to help you out. But if it can wait, so if this is some supply that you'll need for closing procedures, or if this is some question you have about something that would happen later on in the day, please, we were happy to answer your question, but give us a call starting at 6:30 a.m. or later. That allows us to prioritize the time-sensitive questions first. So again, to reiterate, if it's a pressing issue, call us right away. We're here to help. But if it's something that can wait, please delay until about 6:30 a.m. and then we'll have much more time to help you out. So with that, that's all the things you need to do before the 6 a.m. start of the polls. Please reference your notebook for any more specific information. But now I'll pass it over to Sean to talk about what goes on during the day.
Thanks, Gretchen. So now that the polls are open and you are going throughout the day, we're going to talk about a lot of the things that you're doing throughout the day and give you some reminders there. So there's several things that you are taking care of and keeping track of throughout the day. Firstly, I want to point out the check-in process. There's a handout of this that you'll put at your check-in table, and it's also in your chief's notebook. This is the script to follow for when you're check-in officers or checking in voters. You can see there are sections highlighted for the things to say. Additionally, this is, there's nothing, the check-in process is not different per se from a regular general election, but there are added steps because this is a dual party primary. As you can see, or you'll be able to see in your chief's notebook, we have to ask the voter, or your check-in officers will ask the voter later on in or after asking for their name and address and asking for their ID. They'll ask them which party primary they want to vote in. Do you wish to vote in the Democratic Party primary or the Republican Party primary? And the voter will answer that question. And then additionally, when the check-in is being confirmed and the election officer is repeating back the voter's name, they'll also repeat back the voter's choice so that the voter has a chance to confirm that, or if they were misheard or if they wish to change their mind, they can do that too. We recommend that when the voter is communicating that to the check-in officer, that the check-in officer takes that time to grab the permit that they're going to be handing to the voter to take over to the ballot table, so that as they're continuing with that check-in process, they've already got it in their hand and they've made that connection when that information was communicated to them. And so speaking of the check-in process with driver's license and DMV issued ID cards, just want to point out that we have simplified the procedures a little bit for you here when it comes to identifying these types of IDs. So essentially, if you have a DMV issued ID and it scans on the poll pad, when you go to look up the voter, or when the check-in officer goes to look up the voter and the voter is found, then you know that the voter is registered on your poll book and you can proceed with the check-in process there. If you have a DMV issued ID that does not scan, at that point, you would check to see if it is a driver privilege card, which is not an acceptable ID. There's more information about what you do at this point in your chief's notebook on a chapter titled Acceptable IDs. So just want to point out that this should be a little bit simpler at the time when you're actually going through the check-in. And speaking of checking in, as a reminder, the voter is not checked in to vote until you see the success screen where it says process successfully. You may hear a little sound as well, a little tone as well. The Election officers should not be giving the voting permit to the voter until they see this screen so that they know the voter has been checked in to the party primary that they wish to in which they wish to vote, and that they're going to receive their credit for having voted. So it's a full process from start to finish, and this is how you know this success screen that they are good to proceed to the ballot table. We mentioned earlier that the poll pads are in what we called single app mode and that you can't exit the poll pad app. Just want to point out that there's no functionality that's being lost here. It's just that once the poll pad is turned on and you're opened up for the day, you are still in the poll pad application, and that's where you're going to stay all day. The admin tablets that you have are not poll pads and they don't have that application, so they can't be used to check in voters. They still have access to all the apps that you'll use throughout the day, but the poll pads themselves will just be in the poll pad app, but the poll pad app is still the same. Another thing you're doing throughout the day is you're keeping track of your voter counts. So here's an example of that worksheet. You're checking to see how many voters have been checked in on all of your poll pads and taking stock also of the number of voters who have been checked in but are not yet at the DS200 casting their ballot. They're still marking their ballot, and then comparing that to the number of ballots that have been cast on all of your or both of your DS200s. And those numbers, or the difference between all those numbers, should be 0. And if you find any issues throughout the day, because you're doing this periodically, you can look into what may have occurred, try to figure out what happened if you have an issue at the check-in table, and this is your chance to kind of keep tabs on that throughout the day, and at every interval, take stock of that. Speaking of other things that you're doing throughout the day at certain times, there are 3 turnout surveys that we ask you to do at 9 a.m., noon, and 3 p.m. We recommend that you schedule an alarm on your phone or ask somebody else to, because any officer can submit this survey. You can give them this handout for how they're going to submit the survey. There's a link on the admin tablet to go and submit the survey. Again, just want to mention that anybody can do this. It does not have to be the chief or the assistant chief, but it can be. And there are 3 times throughout the day that you are submitting this survey. So go ahead and schedule those before they happen so that you get a reminder once it's time to go do that. When you're doing the survey, we will ask for the check-ins that you're having by party though. So this slide is an example of where on the poll pad you can see the check-ins for each party primary, because as we mentioned, or as we alluded to, we're essentially running 2 elections at the same time. So we need the numbers for the check-ins for both party primaries. In the top left of any poll pad, there's a button for the menu. And then once you tap on that button, you can tap into the summary report, and it's right there in the middle of the screen. Those are the numbers that we are looking for those turnout surveys. And this is also the same place where you're going to be finding those numbers when you are ready to complete your SORs at the end of the day and as you're closing the poll. So that is where you go to see this, and we'll talk a little bit more about that once we get to that section. Another thing you're doing throughout the day, as a reminder, is you're recording anything relevant into your chief's notes. So things like problems that you've had with your equipment, or any incidents that have occurred, any voter registration incidents that you've seen, or just any observations and comments that you might have. You're keeping track of these throughout the day, so you don't have to go back and try to remember what happened. You have this is a document that you're maintaining as necessary throughout the day. Our election officer form evaluation form has, I believe, a new format. So I'm going to pass it over to Gretchen to talk with you a little bit about this.
Thanks, Sean. So yes, we have a slightly revised version of our election officer evaluation form, just to make things a little bit simpler, both for you and for our staff when we're reviewing applications or evaluations. So in the past, we've asked our chiefs to evaluate every single officer. Even if they just said everyone was great, we wanted just a little bit of feedback about each officer. And now we really just want to focus on some of the kind of standouts either way for election officers. So please continue to rate your assistant chief so we can figure out if they would make a good potential chief going on, as well as any officers that you would recommend to be promoted to a chief, some really standout people in your precinct. And then also we want to give a space if there are any significant issues that come up with your officers. We want to give you a chance to provide more information about them as well. So if that's the case when you're doing these evaluations, we really love getting as specific information as possible. That's really helpful as we're reviewing information about our officers. So if you have any specific anecdotes or incidents that come up on election day, that makes your feedback especially helpful. And then once you have finished your evaluation, we ask that you do this around 5 o'clock. So that way you get it out of the way before closing happens, but you still have a chance to kind of observe your officers throughout the day. You can go ahead and put that in a new number 10 envelope. So there was an EO evaluations envelope previously, and now it just has a new name to be consistent with the rest of our envelopes. So you put all of the evaluations in that envelope, and just like you do with all of the other envelopes at the end, please sign and seal the envelope. And then I'll pass it back over to Sean.
Thanks, Gretchen. As we're talking about the day, we're also going to go into some non-routine voter situations that you may encounter and how to approach, how best to help out these voters. So the first one we're going to talk about is a voter who comes into your precinct with the absentee ballot that they had requested. They received it, and now they have it in their hand in front of you. This voter is able to return this ballot or turn this ballot into you and write onto it absentee surrendered, which you will keep with the rest of your spoiled ballots, but this voter does not have to vote provisionally because they have brought in their ballot and surrendered it to you. So this voter is able to be checked in and vote routinely on machine in your precinct. So this may be something that you see happen, and this is the way that we would help out these voters. Additionally, we'll talk about voters who are marked as inactive on your poll book. If the voter has not moved, it still shows in your poll book that they have the same address for registration that they are offering to vote with. Then this one's pretty easy. You just fill out you have the voter fill out the affirmation of eligibility form, and they are good to also vote routinely and cast their ballot on the DS200. However, if the voter has moved, you're seeing a different address and they've moved to a new address, that's when you would jump into your moving conditions grid or flow chart. We'll talk a little bit more about that later because they would not be, they may have a different voting option, but this one's pretty straightforward. If that is the case, that they're still at the same address, you don't need to give us a call or have them vote provisionally. If they are still, they're still at the same address, they just have to sign that affirmation. For any voter, if you see a message next to their name or a little status in the poll book, when you tap on this is when you'll see additional information about the voter to give you a guide on how to help them or where you need to turn to for the resources to determine what their voting options are. So don't think that you have to memorize what to do for every single voter situation. The poll pad will have that information for you as part of as a flag associated with the voter. One that I'll point out here is you can see it's titled confirmation mailing. I just want to point out that this is very similar to the inactive situation. We have clarified the text on this screen that you see here, that message, to help you out with that workflow and mention that it is the same as the inactive. It's covered by the same what if in your manual. And the same thing, if the voter has not moved, they'll simply fill out the affirmation of eligibility. And if they have moved, you'll jump into the moving conditions. So very similar there. Another one that you might see is this one here titled Verify ID. This one you wouldn't have seen in 2023 because this only applies during federal elections. And this election here is a federal election. These voters have a requirement to the requirement comes from a federal law called the Help America Vote Act. They have a requirement to show a form of ID the first time they vote, and anything on the Virginia acceptable IDs list is okay for them, except for the ID confirmation statement. So if you see this pop up or this message with a voter, they are good to vote routinely and normally, unless they don't have an acceptable ID. These are the only voters who cannot sign the ID confirmation statement. But if they have their ID, they have their driver's license, they have their utility bill, they have anything else on that list, you're good to proceed and check them in. They can vote normally. Now, any voter who checks in to vote, but then realizes or wishes that they don't want to vote can have their check-in reversed. And there are instructions for how to do that in your manual. You can see that they're the same instructions here on the screen. But one thing I do really want to point out here is that if a voter is checked in for the wrong party primary, or they realize that they would actually prefer to vote in the other party's primary, say they get checked in for one party's primary, they receive their ballot, but before casting it, they have chosen to vote in the other party's primary, that's okay. the way that you would handle that is to, you would take back their ballot and it can be spoiled, but you'll essentially do the check-in process again, but for the other party's primaries. So, but before you do that, you have to cancel the check-in and then recheck them in and start that process back over. So there are instructions again in your notebook for how to do that. Just because they choose to vote in the other party's primary, they don't have to vote provisionally. They get to make that choice before they cast their ballot. And for everything else beyond these, you have the what ifs is a great document from the Virginia Department of Elections covering all sorts of non-routine voter situations. In fact, everything we just talked about and things that we'll keep talking about are in here. So definitely recommend that you take a look at these. They're in your chief's notebook that's posted and that you'll receive. They are all printed on a yellow section in the middle. We also recommend that you take a look at them before Election Day so you have it at the back of your mind as a resource, and so that you know where to look whenever a non-routine voter comes in at any time of the day. You can't predict when they're going to arrive, but you know where to look to help them out. And now I think we have a knowledge check here, a little quiz for you. I'm going to pass on over to Gretchen to go through that.
Yes, thank you. And so, yeah, we have one more knowledge check just to see if this is all making sense in terms of non-routine voter situations. So I'll go ahead and launch one more poll. There, so this should all be showing up on your screen now. And so the question is, during check-in, what should you do if a voter is marked inactive, but they have not moved? So your options are A, instruct them to complete the affirmation of eligibility form, B, instruct them to vote a provisional ballot, or C, ask them to show another form of ID. Let's see, our results are streaming in this way as well. So give it just a couple more seconds. But it looks like you guys definitely got the message, which is always encouraging. Yes. There you go. It looks like just about everyone has answered. So I'll end the poll. And the correct answer was A, instruct them to complete the affirmation of eligibility form, as Sean mentioned during his presentation. But if you have any further questions about non-routine voter situations, like Sean mentioned, the what ifs are a great place to start. You can always call the office if you have further questions. Okay. And with that, we will move into a discussion about the same-day registration and provisional ballot process. So same-day registration is relatively new in Virginia elections. And I know that you all have completed SDR-specific training, so I don't want to go over everything in terms of the SDR process, but just some kind of brief reminders about the overall process and to just give you the refresher and clarify anything that might still be a little bit confusing. So to start, same-day registration is a subset of the provisional ballot process, which means that on Election Day, the vote that an SDR voter, a same-day registration voter, casts is set aside and is considered and counted only if the voter registration information is verified after Election Day. So generally, the people who do same-day registrations are people who have not been registered in Virginia before, or people who have moved and hadn't updated their registration prior to Election Day. In terms of where they complete the same-day registration and where they vote, so any person who is qualified to register to vote may complete that same-day registration process in the precinct where they currently reside. I'll get into more of how you figure that out in just a moment. But before I get into some more of the specifics of same-day registration, the one thing, if you have one takeaway from this part of the briefing, I want to emphasize that if you're unsure of what to do on Election Day, please call the office. We are here to help. You're not alone. We're here to walk you through any questions or confusion you might have. So if there is a question about kind of the overall procedures, and what to do as an election officer, you could call that general support line at the bottom, 703-324-4735. But if you have a question about a specific voter or specific questions about voter registration, voter eligibility for SDR, things like that, the voter registration line is the best number to call. And all of this information is in your chief's notebook, so you have no need to memorize these numbers beforehand. But please do give us a call. And so briefly, I'm not going to get into all of the details about how to do this, but these are the 4 general steps you take to determine whether a voter is eligible to complete an SDR in your precinct. So the first step would be to search for the voter's name in the poll book. And so in one scenario, if the voter is not listed in the poll book, but they do live in your precinct, that one's easy. They're able to do an SDR and you can proceed with the SDR process. If they are in the poll book, then you have a couple more things to check before you move forward. So take note of the precinct number and name that shows up in your poll book. The next steps are using tools to figure out the jurisdictions where the voter lives. So the first thing would be the My Neighborhood app, helps you figure out the precinct that the voter currently lives in. And then the precinct locator is a separate tool on the admin tablet to figure out the congressional district where the voter currently lives. And then once you have all of that information in front of you, you use that with these tools we call the moving conditions charts to figure out where the voter is eligible to vote, whether that's in this precinct or somewhere else. So just to break that down a little bit more, so after you'd search for the voter's name in the poll book, and if they are in the poll book, you want to figure out where the voter currently lives. So that's where you would go into the admin tablet into the My Neighborhood app. And then, like I said, there's a lot more instructions about how to navigate this in the Chief's notebook. So once you do that, then you would go into a different tool in the admin tablet. We also have a paper copy if that's easier for you, called the precinct locator, and that helps you figure out the congressional district where the voter currently lives. And then you take all of that information to determine where the voter is eligible to vote. So that's where it depends on a number of situations based on how far the voter moved, if it was within the precinct or within the county, a couple of different variations there, and the time that the voter moved. So depending on how recently that was or if that was a few years ago. And so you can use this grid to navigate to figure out the current situations. Some voters will only have one option about where they're able to vote. Other voters may have a couple different options. For example, some voters will be able to vote routinely in their old precinct, or they can choose to do an SDR in their new precinct. That choice would be up to the voter if those situations are applicable to them. And so we have two different tools for the moving conditions. They have the exact same information. They're just laid out in slightly different ways because some information is a little bit easier. I personally find the flowchart a little bit easier to navigate. Some people really prefer the moving conditions grid. So it's up to you. But you use either of these tools to figure out what the options are available to the voter. And I know I went through that very quickly, but we walk through this in a lot more detail in the same-day registration checklist in the Chief's notebook. So when you have an SDR voter, that's the place to start. We will also provide this as a separate handout guide that you could give to your SDR specialist on election day. And again, as I said, if you have questions about SDR eligibility, give the office a call. Okay, so that all part of the process was to determine whether a voter is eligible to an SDR. And let's say that they are, and you've decided they're going to go ahead with the SDR process. Then you would go into actually helping them fill out the provisional envelope. So this is a two-sided envelope, depending on the type of provisional ballot they're going to cast. So if they're an SDR, a same-day registration voter, they would fill out this side on the left. So this is the same-day registration side of the provisional ballot envelope. And in all other provisional situations that are not related to same-day registration, they would fill out the non-SDR side, which we have here on the right side of the screen. And I want to emphasize again and again that it's really important that they fill out every single required field on this form to make sure that their ballot is able to be counted. And so those are noted in little asterisks next to the required fields. So please double check to make sure that everything is filled out. And to do this, we have a checklist to make sure that you've covered all of the necessary steps to fill out the provisional ballot envelope. And so I won't go through everything step by step, but please do make sure you check everything off and complete everything as you're filling this out with the voter. But I'd want to give a couple highlights specific to the dual party primaries because it's a little bit different for the provisional ballot process. And so when you are completing the provisional ballot envelope with the voter, make sure that you write both the precinct name and the party in the upper right corner of the provisional envelope to note that if it was a Democratic ballot cast or a Republican ballot cast, you can just write a D or an R in the upper right. I'll show you what that looks like in just a moment. And then at the end, once the voter has completed their ballot and it's been sealed, place that final sealed provisional envelope in the appropriate larger number 1A envelope. Like we talked about before, there are 4 different number 1A envelopes depending on whether it's an SDR or a non-SDR provisional, and if it's a Democratic or a Republican ballot that was cast. So just to show you what some of those things look like, make sure to write the D or the R depending on what type of ballot is cast in the upper right corner of the envelope. So that's on the envelope, the top right corner there. And then at the end, to make sure that you put the completed sealed version in the appropriate one of these 4 1A envelopes. And the last big thing I wanted to emphasize with this part of the process is that provisional ballots should never be cast in the DS200 scanner. That should always be completed seated at the table. The voter should complete the ballot seated at the table with you to make sure that they don't get lost or go anywhere else. And then you put that ballot in the envelope and seal it at the table. Should never be cast on the DS200 scanner. So that all of the completed provisional ballots can go into one of these 4 envelopes. Something else that I want to draw your attention to with the provisional process, the SDR process, is to make sure that voters complete all required fields in the envelope, especially the section number 3. So to show you here in the envelope, it's that about a third of the way down the page on the left-hand side, box number 3 was the most commonly forgotten fields completed on the form. So that's something we want to make sure does not happen again with this election, that every voter should make sure they answer at least that first line of the question. So you can see on the right-hand side, make sure they mark yes or no at the top in that question. And if they mark yes in that box, then they also have to answer the follow-up question that says, if yes, has your right to vote been restored? So please double check, triple check, quadruple check when you're helping a voter fill out the provisional envelope that they complete all required fields, especially that section number 3. And so I know I went through all of that very quickly, but like I said, this is just a refresher about same-day registration practices. But if you're still looking for a refresher, if you'd like to get a little bit more practice going through some different scenarios for same-day registration, we are holding an additional opportunity to make sure you're ready for Election Day. Coming up this Monday, we'll be holding an SDR briefing, which is also going to be held on Zoom webinar like this. We would love to have you there. It's completely optional. But if you're interested in attending that, you can register in the election officer portal. And if you're not able to attend live on Monday, we will send out a recording afterwards to make sure you get all the help you need. And just to reiterate one more time, if you have any questions about SDR, please don't hesitate to call the office. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jean, who's going to go over closing the polls on Election Day.
Thank you, Gretchen. I'm going to share with you some tips to help you get through this last part of the day. The finish line is in sight, but now is the time that we want you to stop, take a breath, get a drink of water, and just collect yourself for a minute, as well as your team. Hopefully you have set aside some time in the late afternoon when things are quiet. You can give out the one-page guides to each of the people that are going to be doing the various tasks at closing. It's better for folks to have had a chance to review that material versus kind of getting it cold. Here's your form at 7 o'clock. Okay, the DS200s, you've been using both of them, you've been using one of them during the day. The other one has been turned around, assuming that everything has gone well for you during the day. We'd like you to shut them down one at a time. Don't try to shut them down at the same time. If something should go wrong with the first one that you've been using and has ballots in it, and you've already shut down the second scanner, then you've really added a whole lot of time to your closing process. So just shut down one, get it all the way closed down, then move on to the second one. The USB flash drives, we have orange ones and yellow ones. Each scanner has an orange one and a yellow one. You're going to go through the closing process for both scanners and pull all the flash drives, but you're going to sort them. The orange ones go in envelope number 7. The yellow ones go in the purple pouch. The number 7 envelope is going to go to the courthouse, where they're just going to sit there for the period dictated by law and not be touched. The yellow ones are going to come back here in the purple pouch, and those are used to obtain the results of the election. We've labeled those flash drives to make it really easy to know which one goes where. The next part is your collector officers. They are going to fill out some paperwork this is a chain of custody form. They're going to fill out their names, their signatures, and information about these flash drives. They're going to put this with the flash drives inside that clear plastic bag. It's called a trip lock. And they're going to tear off that seal. You'll want to make sure that that seal stays with you, I believe. And then the collector officers are going to leave and bring all of this back to the government center. The trip lock bag is also going to contain the ballots from the drop box, any that may be in there. If you have a co-located precinct, it's perfectly fine to put all those ballots together in one trip lock bag. No problem there. And what we've seen happen a couple times in the last election is the collector officers were really focused on getting out by a certain time versus making sure that they had everything they needed before they left. Please don't be that precinct. Make sure that your job as the chief is to check that everybody's doing their job. You're delegating everything, but you're also verifying that things get done. So make sure that those collector officers don't leave unless they have the trip lock bag and they have the purple pouch. The machine certification form, as Ravi has pointed out, has been redesigned to make this much easier for you to fill out. And this redesign actually is much easier for you to tell if you've done everything, because you've got all those things in a column on the right and signatures at the bottom. If you see any blank spaces, that means something's missing. So please make sure that everything is filled out on this form. The orange flash drives from both scanners are going to go into the number 7 envelope. You're only going to record a little bit of information on here, not as much as goes on to your machine certification form. You're just going to do the serial numbers of your 2 scanners, the opening and closing seal numbers, and the opening and closing protected counters and public counters. So you can copy all of this right off of the machine certification form. Then you seal this, put one of those white stickers across the seal, 2 signatures, and this envelope is good to go. Poll pads come back to the office, and then we take information off of those poll pads to give the voters credit for voting in these 2 elections, whether they voted in one primary or the other primary. To help us do that as quickly as possible, because there's lots of people who want to know the results, please pack the poll pads powered on. We want to see the display on and leave it on the poll pad app screen where it should be normally. So as long as you don't turn them off, they're going to be in this correctly. Please do remember to seal the cases, and also look at the back of the poll pad and make sure you're putting it in the case that matches. You see the tag hanging off of it in the picture there. Match the tag to the poll pad number on the back of the poll pad. There's a little bit of a joke around here called the walk of shame. We have to call people after the election and ask folks to come in to sign all the documents that they didn't sign. And so we see people walking down the hallway with this very glum look on their face. They're not happy about coming back into the office to have to sign something that they should have signed on election night. So remember, you never pre-sign things, but make sure everybody does sign it. This is super, super important. 70 people had to come back after the November election to sign stuff. We see SORs come back that have no signatures at all. So here's a checklist you can use. This is in your materials. Give this form to somebody, and their job is to make sure that everything on this list gets checked off and is appropriately signed. Let's keep Kay and the supply team happy. Everything that you take off a wall, that you pack up, please try to make it tidy. We as taxpayers pay for all of this information. We try to be good stewards of the county's resources and your taxpayer money and reuse things as much as we possibly can. So take the blue tape off, flatten things out, try to make it as tidy as you can so that we can preserve these materials for the next election. When you're getting ready to leave, we've got a form for that, as we do for everything. It's called the Chief Supply Return Form. The back of it is a windshield sign. This is another chain of custody form. We're saying that you, the chief, you are delivering to us at the county a black kit, a certain number of boxes of voted ballots, number 3, the unvoted ballots in number 6 boxes, and your poll pads. So you're going to want to make sure that all of these things are in your car. Put that form on your front seat, keep it handy. When you approach the depot, you'll want to pop that thing on your, or hold it up so that they can see on the back that you're precinct number 507 or whatever. We don't want to hear that you've left boxes of ballots, voted or unvoted, in your cage, or that there are poll pads still back in the cage. Please bring back all of these items. And oh, please be sure to let your rover know that you've left the precinct. If we don't hear from you, we're going to have people calling you saying, where are you? We're wondering, have you gone home? Have you forgotten to bring your materials back? Your chief's notebook has a map for each of the 4 return depots. This is the one for the government center. Chiefs are the black arrows. You're going to come in at the entrance to the government center that is beyond the entrance that has the traffic light. It is not the traffic light. You're going to go down under the building to where through the loading dock. There will be people down there to direct you. There will be signs. It's generally pretty easy to find. And there will also be signage at each of the other locations, depending on where you're going. Be aware that you do need to return the materials to the same depot that you picked them up from on Monday. And now we'll turn this over to Ravi for any final reminders.
Thank you, Jean. We're on the home stretch now. So just a couple final things, and then we're going to open it up to all of your questions. And many of our managers and other office staff are ready to answer those live for you. All right, first, I want to provide you an update on early voting. Florence Brown, our early voting manager, and Bill Turler, early voting assistant manager, are very excited to have anyone who wants to show up to vote early. Voting so far for this election has been slower than we might have expected, but we do think it's going to pick up as we get closer and closer to Election Day. Just remember that we have early voting available through Saturday, March 2nd, and all 16 of our locations will be open from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. starting this Saturday, February 24th, and again on Saturday, March 2nd. So you could vote at the Fairfax County Government Center. We're open here weekdays, 8 a.m. to 4:30 p.m., or the 15 additional locations around the county are open on weekdays from 1 p.m. to 7 p.m. You can see a list of all the locations and the addresses in that box there at the bottom. So again, we have 3 locations open right now through this Friday, and starting this Saturday, we'll have 16 locations open throughout the county. All right, it's time to have you all sworn in now. Please raise your right hand and speak along with me. I do solemnly swear or affirm that I will perform the duties for this election according to law and the best of my ability, and that I will studiously endeavor to prevent fraud, deceit, and abuse in conducting this election. Excellent, and congratulations. You've all been sworn in and are ready to serve on Election Day. Now, shortly after this briefing, give us a little time, we will send you an email with a link to take a short quiz so that you can receive credit for having watched this briefing. So that information will, once we finish here, we'll make everything live in the election officer portal, and we'll send you an email when it's ready. So then you can go in and take a short quiz. So we hope you've received all the information. If you don't pass that quiz, if you don't get it correctly, you'll have an opportunity to take it again, and you can watch the briefing recording again if you need to. But there is a short quiz to make sure you've understood the content of this briefing. All right, so now let's answer any questions you might have. We saw a number of questions come in as we were presenting the content today, and I believe we've answered almost all of them in the written Q&A, but we're going to go through some of the notable questions and share them with all of you. But again, use that question and answer function, Q&A function at the bottom of your screen to submit any questions you might have about any topic that we've discussed today, and we're very happy to answer them for you. And if we're not able to get to your question, you can always email us or call us at the standard contact information that you always have the opportunity to do. And if there's questions that are very specific to your location or about the election officers assigned in your precinct, those are definitely ones that you want to handle by contacting us separately. We want to answer questions today that can be of help to everyone. And to help us answer these questions, we have many of our office staff available on this briefing today. So we have our IT manager, Cord Whitehouse, our voter services and SDR manager, Bushra Ardalan. We have our deputy registrar for early voting satellites, Florence Brown, our deputy registrar for absentee voting, Sean Stewart, our voting equipment and logistics manager, Tyrone Allen, our election inventory and supply manager, Kay Garrison, and our clerk to the electoral board and polling place liaison, Beth Methvessel, along with many other office staff and managers. So if you have a question that pertains to one of their areas, they can chime in and provide you the most relevant response. So Jean and Kelly, do you have some questions for us to answer?
We certainly do. Quite a lot of them, actually. Okay, I think the first question here, we'll give this to you, Robbie. Are the schools closed on March 5th? And then kind of with that, what do we do if there are high school teams practicing or children in the SAC program who come into the polling area?
That's a great question. So on Tuesday, March 5th, FCPS schools have a teacher workday. So no students will be regularly in the schools on that day, with the exception of the SAC programs, as we mentioned. The SAC program is in effect on that day, so there might be a handful of students at locations where SAC is in effect. But again, there won't be regular classes or hundreds or thousands of students floating around. What you will have are teachers and other building staff that might be in the building on that day. I know Beth Methvessel, our clerk to the electoral board and polling place liaison, has been regularly engaging with the schools. Beth, do you have anything you want to add to that?
Thanks, Ravi. The answer you provided in the Q&A is probably the best because it's not a one size fits all with respect to where SAC is in each of these locations. So I do think it's best to, when you go to your polling place the week before, you should have the location of those SAC rooms and be able to determine if there is a possibility that voters would be in any way near that area, or on the flip side, if parents or voters, I'm sorry, parents of children in the SAC program are moving through the polling area. Sometimes they will have to share that front entrance, so I don't think that's a problem. It's just we don't want any individuals on either side hanging out in those areas. So.
Excellent. Thank you, Beth. Jean, Kelly?
Okay, I've got a question for Bushra or Cheryl. What should we say to a voter who wants to vote in a primary different from the party they usually vote for, but they're afraid of getting on the other party's mailing list or somehow it being revealed to that other party that they crossed over?
Yeah, it's going to happen. A voter may vote in any election, of course, regardless of the absentee ballot they requested, regardless of how they voted in the past. And of course, as an election officer, you don't know how they voted in the past. However, the parties and election-related organizations can request and purchase voter rolls from the Department of Elections. And they can find out the names of all the voters in our county. They can find out who voted. And they'll, of course, then they'll find out what elections they voted in. There's nothing we can do about that. It's public information. And this is how people will get on another party's mailing list. But it's legal, it's in the law, and there's nothing we can do about it. It could only be addressed, through a change in legislation.
Sure, I just want to follow up on that. One of the questions we always get is about, would someone know who I voted for? So just to confirm, which elections you vote in could become a matter of public record, but not who you actually vote for on the ballot. Is that correct?
Right. The fact that you voted is public. How you voted is private. Your actual ballot, even absentee ballots, and we're opening that envelope with the absentee ballot inside, we don't open that absentee ballot. It's dropped in a box, and only after the voter's name is disassociated from that ballot, are those ballots opened up and then straightened out, unfolded and so forth. So we do everything we can to keep the way the voter voted, private, secret.
Thank you, Cheryl. I have a quick question for Sean Stewart. Sean, who's our deputy registrar for absentee mail voting. He is from Kansas City, and he's a really big fan of all of you as Chiefs, and maybe another sports team as well. But I saw a question come in the chat. Sean, could someone surrender an absentee ballot for one party and then choose to vote in another party's primary?
Well, Ravi, thanks for that intro. What everybody's thinking to themselves, my goodness, what is this guy doing? All I can say is, how about our Chiefs? And I mean the ones right here in Fairfax County. You guys are amazing. You might even be Super Bowl champion quality as far as I can tell, maybe like my Kansas City Chiefs. But seriously, great question, Ravi. You're absolutely going to have voters come in. We've had, I think, something like 4%, just under 4% of absentee applicants that have come in and voted early in person so far. So you're definitely going to encounter some of that on election day. But for the folks that come in with that ballot, they don't have to have the package or anything else. They just have to have that absentee ballot to surrender. As your guide explicitly lists, you'll be able to write absentee ballot surrendered on that envelope or on the ballot, take possession of that, any other materials they may have to accept that so they can vote routinely, not have to vote provisionally. Hopefully that got what you needed, Ravi.
Yeah,
It did, thank you.
If I could just jump in very quickly, the voter only needs the ballot. This is one of the questions asked. They don't need to have their envelope. If they just bring their ballot, their absentee ballot, that's fine. Don't turn a voter away because they didn't bring their envelope as well.
Sure, correct me if I'm wrong. I think the most important part is to receive that ballot. Ultimately, the ballot, it has the package, that's helpful, but otherwise to at least receive the ballot. But also then to mark it correctly in the poll pad, so we know that voter can then is being checked in to vote routinely.
Okay, you got it.
Right, because without the ballot, then they vote a provisional ballot. But with the ballot, they can vote normally, put that ballot in the DS-200. Of course, a provisional ballot is never put in a DS-200.
The next question is going to go to Gretchen. We've had 2 or 3 questions come in through the chat from co-located precincts saying, I only see one collector officer on my roster. How does that exactly going to work?
That's a good question. Yeah, thank you for the thank you, Jean. So in co-located precincts, each precinct will have one collector officer, with the point that the collector officers for that whole polling place will travel together in the same car with the materials from the 2 precincts together. So that way you're not losing as many officers during closing, and there's still 2 people from opposing parties in the same car driving the materials back to the government center on election night. So it's really important that you check and make sure that all the materials are ready from both precincts, not just your own, before the collector officers leave on election night in the co-located precincts.
Okay, we've got a question for Bushra. When's the last day that a voter can register to vote for this election? And if they miss that registration deadline, what should they do?
So the last day for registration was February 12th. So if they miss the deadline, and if they are a new voter to Virginia, they can do SDR. If they are moving according to the moving rule, if they can go back to their old precinct, they can vote in their old precinct if they are eligible, and their move was after last election, November election. So they have the option, do SDR, or if they are eligible to vote for their old precinct.
Okay, I'm going to turn this over to Kelly for the next 2 or 3 questions.
Okay. I have a question for Cheryl or Bushra. On the SDR application, is the full social security number required or just the last 4 numbers?
Yes, full social security number is required because SDR side of the envelope is a voter registration application. So always for SDR, full social security number is required.
And then question for Gretchen, is the black bag and box pickup under the building or inside on Monday, March 4th?
So that's a good question. So it'll be at the loading dock so I believe this is for the Fairfax County Government Center. So there's the 4 depots. So those will have slightly different locations. But if you're picking up here at the Fairfax County Government Center, it'll be at the loading dock, which is outside of the building, but you kind of drive in underneath to get there, if that makes sense. You don't need to leave your car or go into the building. You just drive in. If you follow the instructions in the map we provide in the Chief's Notebook, that'll be the best way to navigate how to get in. I don't know if, Tyrone, is there anything you want to add about how to get to the loading dock?
There will be adequate signage pointing the way from the front driveway all the way through under to the loading dock and back out.
Okay. Question for either Ravi or Sean Rogers. Does the poll pad check-in confirmation screen indicate that particular political party for the voter?
Thanks for the question. No, it does not. It just confirms that they have been checked in. So that's why we are recommending that as check-in officers are going through the check-in process, that once the voter makes that selection to them, the check-in officer grabs the permit corresponding to that party primary and has it in their hand as they're proceeding through the rest of the check-in, so that when they hand it to them and the check-in, once they get that process successfully screened, they don't forget along the way. So thank you for the question. No is the answer.
I see a question, excuse me, that got submitted in the chat about pouches. So Kay, I think we want to loop you in on this one. So we had a question about what's the difference between the green pouch and the orange pouch. And I think we could also take this opportunity to provide a quick update about the sealing for the orange pouch. Do you want to share that, Kay?
Sure. The green pouch has all of the supplies in it, like the scissors and the rubber bands and the paper clips. And that's why we ask you if like say your scissors are broken, put a note around them, put a rubber band around them, put them back in the kit and say broken on that note, so we'll know how, which ones need to be repaired. The orange pouch is where you put all your keys, your lanyards, that kind of thing, and also any driver's license or any other little things that you found that, maybe a bracelet or something that you found that, and you return them into that. The orange pouch, you don't have to have a seal on it this time. All you need to do is zip it and push the lock down. And that's all you need to do. But if you have any other questions on anything that relates to the supplies, please let me know. I'd be glad to help you. And by the way, thank you all for serving.
Thank you, Kay. And 2 quick things to add there. So number 1 is your information, your contact information is printed in the Chief's Notebook on that supply checklist page, right? I think it's towards the end of section 2. So if they have any questions, they can contact you directly.
Yes.
And I also saw there was a person in the Q&A that said they love Kay. They want to give a shout out to Kay. And we all do as well, because we recognize a very important milestone very recently, just earlier this month, right? Kay has just achieved 25 years with Fairfax County government. We're so happy and appreciative to have her with us. That's an incredible accomplishment. We're really happy. Thank you, Kay.
Thank you.
I'd like to answer a couple of questions about the election officer portal. We've received some questions about how can I find my roster? If you go to you can do that 2 ways. Go to the chief page, which you can access from along the top of the screen. There's drop-down menus that says chief. You can drop down that menu and just go to the chief homepage. From there, you can link to the roster, or on that drop-down menu is a link for the roster itself. There have been questions about how to find information about the other chief and assistant chief in a co-located precinct situation. Go to the precinct page from that drop-down menu. That will show you information about who you're serving with in that polling place. You can get in touch with them. We also are giving you information on that roster page about your election officers. People that have canceled recently are going to show up on the recent cancellations page, or recent cancellations block, excuse me. The actual roster itself is always 100% live. If somebody bows out today, you're going to see that the very next time that you check that. So we do recommend that you check your roster daily to see if there have been any people added or subtracted. The very top of the roster page will show you how many people you will have. So the number of election officers varies by the size of the precinct, and you'll see I'm expecting this number. I have this number of vacancies.
Thank you very much, Gene. By the way, for all of you as election officers and chiefs and assistant chiefs in particular, you may have noticed that the election officer portal that we now use is very different than the one we used about a year and a half ago. We made some changes on our end in terms of the software that we use, and we built out a brand new election officer portal ourselves. And that almost single-handedly is a testament and credit to Jean. She's the one who did that. So if you enjoy the fact that now you have all of your information on 1 or 2 pages in the portal, that you're not getting constant emails from us, or you're not getting a spreadsheet here and a PDF here, and it's all in one place, next time say thank you to Jean when you see her. For example, at our open house next week, I know Jean will be there. Gretchen, do we want to give a quick shout out about that open house?
Yes, for sure. So we mentioned earlier the before election day that we have an election officer open house coming up, an election officer open house and a chief open house coming up on Tuesday, the 27th. So it'll run from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. And hopefully we've encouraged you, if you want to get some hands-on practice, want to come meet our staff or ask any final questions before election day, that would be the great chance to do it. And just one more reminder, we've talked a lot about the Chief's Notebook and how helpful it is both before election day and on election day. And so if you would like the paper copy of your Chief's Notebook beforehand to be able to read it and highlight things right in the margins, you can come pick up the physical copy of that at the Chief's Notebook on Tuesday. So we really hope to see you there. I'd love to meet you all in person.
We have one more question for Gretchen. How will reserve chiefs and reserve assistant chiefs be notified of their assignment?
That's a good question. We will definitely communicate it to you over email. We can give you a call as well to remind you and make sure that that precinct works for you. So you'll be able to find the information in your election officer portal, but to receive the notification of when you are assigned, be checking your email for that. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out and we can answer any further questions you might have.
Thank you, Gretchen. I see a few questions for other folks. I see a question here for Court, our IT manager. So the question is from someone who indicated they didn't serve as an officer last year, and they just want to understand that they've got this correctly. What do they have to do with their poll pads after they pick them up on Monday? Do they still need to update them? What does the procedure look like for that now? And again, this was someone who wasn't with us last year, so they haven't seen some of the changes we've made.
Yes, so one of the changes that we made last year that carries through to this election is the poll pads are now getting their final poll book update in-house. We have a large team working with the rovers to get all the poll pads updated and prepared for your individual precinct. So all you will need to do is power on the poll pads and they will be active and ready to go. Now, at the end of the night, what we've asked for you and what has already been discussed is just that you leave the poll pad on and seal it back up in the poll pad case. So while the poll pad is traveling back here to Government Center, we can turn back on the active internet connection on it after voting is ended, and it can upload its voter credit so we can properly apply voter credit to those voters.
Thank you, Court. I see someone had asked, this is a question for Flo or for Bill, and someone asked just how has early voting been going? Have we seen many people? What do we think is going to happen? And then I have a question for Ann after that. Flo, Bill, do one of you want to chime in on that?
Hi, Ravi, thanks. Let's see if I can give you some updated numbers. Currently, in general, the numbers have been very low, unfortunately. We have currently seen approximately 2,000 voters at across the 3 satellite sites. So it's been quite slow, and we're hoping for more people to show up in the next week or so, the next 10 days of early voting. So especially election officers, chiefs, come on out and see us. We'd love to see you.
Awesome. Thank you, Flo. I know all of our election officers, if you're serving on election day, you may want to go and vote early. And so I hope, Flo, we have a ton of people show up on Saturday. Make for a very busy day for everyone. We enjoy that. We love seeing people show up. We have a question for Ann. Ann, someone asked about visitors at the polling place. I know you've been helping coordinate this. They're wondering, is there anyone that they might expect this election at their polling places? I know we don't have anyone, visiting every polling place, but I know we have some visitors. Do you want to share an update on that? Oh, did we lose Ann? She might not be available right now. But I do know that we've had some folks ask for things like exit polling. So they might be there at the end of the day and ask to hear about the numbers, and that's all right. Or they can station themselves near the exit at the polling place, and they can do that. Beth, is there anything you want to add about that in terms of visitors that we might expect at the polling places and the procedures around that?
What that was? Let me just
Oh,
tell you what that was.
I think Anna's
That was
hopping on here.
Oh, is Anne available? Anne, did you want to share an update on visitors to the polling places, specifically some of the ones you've been sending us that we might expect?
Sure. Thank you, Robbie. Sorry, I was answering another question off camera. But yeah, we've gotten a few requests for this election so far. Most of them have been coming in through the Office of Public Affairs, and as they get them, as we get them, I run them by Eric, and he approves people to be poll watchers or to. This time, we've only gotten people who are requesting to come do some exit polls outside of the polling places. So if Eric approves them, then I send them a letter saying that they are authorized to be there. I give Ravi and Gretchen and their team the list of people who are coming and the polling places that they're coming to. And I believe those notes get input so that everybody can see who has been previously authorized to be there. But anybody who has kind of come through this end of the office should have a letter with Eric's signature saying that they have been approved and authorized to be there.
Thank you, Anne. And that's Eric, our General Registrar and Director of Elections. So obviously he approves any of those types of requests. Beth, was there something you wanted to add to that?
Nope, I think that pretty much covers it. Yes, anybody that stays in the, wants to be an observer for longer than 10 minutes or so will have an authorization from our General Registrar, Eric Spicer. There are a few, there's some different rules with respect to the media that want to come in and take pictures. I believe that is still being coordinated through the Office of Public Affairs. But Ravi, you might know better than that. But there's a couple. The law is a little bit different with respect to that type of visitor. They are allowed. They are generally allowed to come in. They can't take pictures of voters' ballots and this type of thing, nor can they conduct an interview inside. But it's just a little bit different for the media.
Right. And if there's any media, we'll alert the chiefs and we'll brief them those specific procedures and how they're a little bit different. So we'll take care of that. Jean, Kelly, I think we had some other questions, and I think we'll wrap up here in about 5 or 10 minutes.
Okay, I have a question for Tyrone or Todd. On March 4th, during setup, what can we remove from the equipment cages to make room for the poll pads?
The great question. The machines will have to stay in the cart until Tuesday morning. But such items as the privacy booths, the signage, the blue bag that houses some of the supply materials, all of those things can be removed from the cart. And then the cart should be re-locked, both locks, overnight, and then remove the machines Tuesday morning. Thank you.
I'd like to add something to what Anne and Beth were saying about these visitors to the polling place. In the precinct, on the precinct page of the portal, chiefs and assistant chiefs can see who we know about who have already gotten approval to come to the polling place. So you'll see a block that says potential visitors and media. So if you've got somebody we already know coming to your particular precinct, you'll see that information there. And one little add-on to what Tyrone said, please also seal the cage on Monday after you do your setup. There is a security log on the inside of the door. And anytime somebody opens and closes that cage, it takes 2 signatures, 2 people to do that. And that's 2 election officers. That's not you and one of your friends. That needs to be sworn officers.
Thank you, Jean. I see a few more questions here. There was a question coming in about the curbside reporting curbside numbers. So just to clarify, on your forms, you're going to report a combined number, total curbside voters who may have voted in either party's primary on that day. But when we receive your poll pads back on election night, there's a way for us to go into the system and see how many curbsides there were for each party. And so in terms of our state reporting system, we'll still have those numbers. Just there's not an easy way for you to get that on election night yourself. I also saw a question come in about, do we still have to open both DS200s, even in an election like this, and especially if there's lower turnout than we expect? Yes, you need to set up and open both DS200s. What you can do again is you can turn one of them around. And so that way you can direct voters to one of them, but that way the second one is set up and ready to go if you need it. I saw a question come in about, it would be nice if we had 2 admin tablets in the future. So that way both the chief and the SDR specialist can be using them, because sometimes you both have to kind of compete for that resource. I have no news to share on that front today, but stay tuned. I saw a question coming about how to download the Chief's notebook. So just keep in mind, there's a page in the election officer portal that has the Chief's notebook posted along with each section separately. But Gretchen, if I'm not mistaken, it requires, I think, 2 or 3 clicks to download the file. Do you want to quickly share how they can do that?
Sure. So if you go into the election officer portal, it'll be at the top of your screen. There's a little tab called Chiefs. So if you click on that, and then you'll have a list of several options to view all the different pages related to serving as a chief. And I believe it's the 4th one listed on there called Chief's Notebook. And so if you click on that, that'll have a little gallery of a bunch of different photos with the different chapters for each Chief's notebook. But the first one on there, the little purple square, is the full Chief's notebook, and that's the full PDF. And so if you click on that, and you'll have to click on that image again, and then you'll be able to see the PDF pop up on your screen. And then once you do that, in the top right-hand corner is the little printer icon, where you'll be able to save or print your version of the notebook. You definitely don't need to print out the entire thing, but if there's 1 or 2 sections that you want to print out ahead of time, you're welcome to do that. But you'll be able to save and download it that way. And so I know that that is a couple of different steps. So if you're having trouble navigating that, please give us a call and we're happy to walk you through that process to get it downloaded on your computer.
Thank you, Gretchen. I saw a question come in about the moving conditions grid. You might recall in that rightmost column, if a voter has moved out of state, it says they're not eligible to vote in most elections unless it's a presidential election. Sean Rogers, do you want to tackle that one and explain for all of our election officers how that works in this election? It's a really good question. I'm glad for the person who submitted it.
Thanks. Sure. Yeah. So that section is on the rightmost column of the moving conditions grid, asking or talking about if a voter has moved out of Virginia. They have an additional or some additional options if this were a presidential election. This is not a presidential election. It's a presidential party primary. So when you see that on your moving conditions grid, it does not apply for this election. So you'll be able to worry about that later this year in November. But for the purposes of that, this is not a presidential election, just a presidential party primary election.
And Sean, I also saw a question about write-ins. Do you want to answer the question about whether there's going to be write-ins in this election?
Sure. Yeah. This is a primary election. And so just like any primary election, there is not a spot for write-ins on the ballots that you'll see there just because it's a primary election.
We've gotten a couple of questions, Ravi, about does the cage need to remain locked during the day?
That's a great question. So let's go through that process from start to finish with your cage, just so we're very clear on this. When you go to your polling place for setup on the final Monday, the day before Election Day, you're gonna have to open your cage to get some of those supplies out. When you seal that cage again, before you close it up, record the seal number on the cage security log that's always printed and packed inside the cage door. That's where you record the seal number that you use on that Monday evening to close up the cage. Then on Tuesday, on Election Day, when you open your cage, you're going to remove ballots, get everything ready for the ballot table. You're not going to need most of your ballots yet. So you could keep them potentially, if you want, in your equipment cage. But no matter what you do, you need to keep that cage locked throughout the day. And that's especially important if your cage doesn't fit in your voting room. If you have to keep it in the hallway or somewhere else, that's why it's so important. We just want everyone to be uniform with this. Keep your cage locked throughout the day. And at the end of the day, when you finalize all your materials, you're packing everything up. As part of that, you're going to record that closing seal number on the cage on the machine certification form. Tyrone, is there anything to add to that?
No, it's an excellent question. The idea is because they used to have the smaller carts that were able to come right into the voting room, and they had those under their sight and purview at all times. These larger carts don't necessarily come into the voting room, but they can be stored in close proximity in a hall or on the stairway. But if they're not in view, they need to be completely locked at all times.
Excellent. Thank you, Tyrone. I saw a question about, are we going to offer de-escalation training? I know we answered some of these in the chat. Cheryl and I both did. It's something we recently did for the office, and we're looking at all options for the future. As we prepare for November's election, we'll be looking at a lot of different things for that. But with that, I think we've answered all the questions that have come in. I see more than 127 questions. And I believe we've answered them all. I think a handful that just came in the last minute or two we haven't been able to answer yet, but we'll go through and answer those, and we'll post some information online. Gretchen, do you have any closing remarks for us?
Yes, I just wanted to take a moment. I know we gave a lot of information at you, so I wanted to remind you just how grateful we are to have you serve with us in this election. We really could not do this without our incredible team of chiefs and assistant chiefs and reserve assistant chiefs as well. And so really grateful for your support and just all that you do to make this election happen. So thank you again, and we look forward to working with you on March 5th.
Thank you, Gretchen. And in terms of next steps from here, as we finish our briefing today, again, we'll send all of you an email with a recording of this briefing and information about how to take that quiz in the election officer portal to receive credit for this. And then looking ahead, Gretchen, correct me if I'm wrong, our next upcoming events for our chiefs and assistant chiefs, if they choose to attend them, would be on Monday, that we have our SDR briefing at 1 p.m. if you want to watch that live. And of course, we'll send a recording. We have our big chief open house, chief and assistant chief open house on Tuesday that you're all welcome to attend and pick up your chief's notebook. And just in general, to take care of everything on your chief checklist and be ready for election day. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct. And if you ever need a reminder about the deadlines and next steps, the portal is the best place to check. And then if you have further questions after checking the portal, give us a call.
Thank you, Gretchen. So in closing, we just want to say thank you. As Gretchen said, we couldn't do this without all of you serving as not just election officers, but specifically as chiefs and assistant chiefs, taking a leading role in making sure things run smoothly. We know it's not easy. We just had an election a few months ago in November, and this year we've got 3 elections. So we really appreciate all of you taking your time to serve this year. On behalf of our electoral board, our John Registrar, Eric Spicer, our Deputy Registrar, Cheryl Jones, and all of our other managers and office staff, please know that we've been working really hard to get everything ready for you. We hope everything goes very smoothly. But again, if you have any questions, concerns, or issues, at any time, feel free to give us a call or an email. We're often here in extended hours. We'll respond to them as soon as we can, but we want to make sure that we have you prepared and ready to go for Election Day. So again, thank you so much. Have a great election and take care.
Thank you all.